When I first started out, it was always a hobby. It was never a business. It was in the late 70s. I had business cards made up. I called myself Vintage Model Railways. I got another job as a manager in a brass bed factory in Botany. And the fellow who was there, he was the fellow who trained me in engineering. Up till then, I was just a truck driver, and I had engineering in my blood. But the fellow who owned the factory trained me in all the engineering. And at the back of the factory, there was a press shop, which I used to operate and manage. And in the corner there is where I first started making tinplate. Then I had a big move from Sydney up to Queensland, which pushed me back a lot. In the same time, I had started another business up there, another bed business with my brother, and that was a registered business. And it wasn't until about 83, 84, I actually registered the business, but it was then registered as Fox Scale Models. From the bed factory, I went up to Mooloolaba where my parents were, and I was manufacturing in two tin sheds out the back of their property in the 80s. And in 1983, I bought some land in Caloundra, and I built the actual factory and shop in Lion Street in Caloundra. I also had a train shop in the front of it, where I didn't sell new, I sold second hand on one side, and on the other side was all my models I built. A full display, like what I display here, of everything that you could find that I ever made up and all that. People would come in and say, "Oh, you make trains," and that, you know. I sold a lot of Hornby 00, etc., second-hand stuff that I used to collect and that. But my main thing was manufacturing in the shop. But a lot of people would come in and sit down and have a talk to me, which was fine, just to like that. And continue there till about 89, when I moved the bed factory into the train factory, and the train factory then moved back to my garage at home. How I started in the 70s was I started making stuff for myself. I was repairing and modifying Hornby clockwork, because back in the 70s they were a dime a dozen, you know, they were lying around everywhere, and they were cheap. They were not like collectors today, and I started modifying. I started making them into 440s and 442s, extending the boilers and extending the tenders and doing things like that. And it was very successful. And from that I decided, well, start making my own trains. I realised back then that Hornby tinplate stations and island platforms and if you could find anything, Hornby never made lamps, and much lamps, only lamps that made with those funny big things, you know that. I found you could find them, they were darn expensive. So my first thing was I started making lamps to go with tinplate. There's one there, brass lamps. They were actually, I used to cast them at home first when I first started. And brass tubing, very similar to something you would find, say, on the American market, because that was the only thing I knew at the time, but quite suitable for Australian railways as well. From then I went into a hell of a lot of things in there. I went into line sides. I went into, my first big thing that I went in for the Hornby Club was the Hornby fence, go on the platforms. And then I went on to platforms, island platforms, the fencing. I did brass lamps, brass loading gauges, telephone poles. I even did wide bases for the Hornby stations, with stations on them. There was other than the other lamps, there was other lamps. There was yard lamps, bigger lamps, double-ended curved lamps. I think that was the major thing I was from then. And then for the island platforms, I did the island ramp, the ramp as well that went under it. The first one was a Midland single, which was a 442. These were all done in the bed in the back of the bed factory, because I needed my boss to show me how to start and how to do it and all that, how to make the frames. The boilers were turned from brass, from offcuts from the brass beds. Frames were from tin plate, because we used to use tin plate in the factory. Anything pressed off that was going to be scrapped, I grabbed. So that's how it started off. From there I did 040s, 440s, which was a copy of the Hornby 4-wheel tank, 4-4 tank. 440s as well, 442s, and then the 27 type 440s as well. 040 tanks I did a couple of rockets, 440 compounds I did, and I also did the 440 County of Bedford. I did some of that. About 85 to about 89, I started manufacturing the bigger locomotives like Merchant Navies, A4s. I did a Cochrane North, things like that. They were all done on one side of the factory, and tinplate was still being manufactured on the other side. Also, a big part of my manufacturing was model boats. I used to do fiberglass model in radio control boats at one end of the other end of the factory, and of course then I utilised it for bodies. Well, at the same time as making locomotives, I decided then to do some rolling stock, and the first lot of rolling stock were four-wheel open wagons. I did four-wheel lumbers and bogie lumber wagons, four-wheel tankers, four-wheel bogie tankers, four-wheel gunpowder vans, a lot of tin vans I did, private owner. This is a standard tin plate van I did. I did these, and they were all done in private owner, and they've done LMS and various Great Western and like that. And I used that. They were usually done with a frame. I did. This has got a Hornby frame, but these ones with the Hornby frames were done for the Hornby Club's AGM vans at their annual general meeting. But that's the standard body that I used on all the vans, and they were done in private owners, a lot of private owners. And a lot of these vans that I did here, there was quite a lot done. There's 74 done altogether, not including the AGM vans. After I did all the rolling stock, virtually around the same time, I was doing tinplate coaches. In the early 80s the first ones I started were the Pullman coaches. They were the cream and brown ones. I did them in two types, one with removable doors and one with printed door on them, screen printed doors on them. Now, numbers on all the coaches I did, I have no idea because I did so many of them. I can give you an idea with the Pullmans. There was something like about 68 of the Pullmans done. Also at the same time there was Great Western Clostry coaches, which was a different pressing altogether. They were side doors. That's the door with the windows on the sides on them. No idea. I think there was probably 100 of them at least around to do all of them. There was the coach and there was a brake coach. The other tin plate coaches that I did was the coaches for the articulated cars, which was the A4s I did. They were in 3-car sets with the rounded back on the end cars. They were for the A4 blue A4s that I used to manufacture. I also did the Great Western side door in three articulated sets. Not a lot, probably the A4s, and then probably only about 20 sets. Also, I was doing some gauge 1 too. That is a brochure I put out on the kits that I used to make, which is the New South Wales locomotive. At the same time, I was in fiberglass. I was doing coaches. I did brake HRs and R cars. I also did some rolling stock, some open wagons in fiberglass, because I could cast them all in one piece. There was a few wagons, not a lot, not a hell of a lot I did in all that, because by 89, I sort of saturated the market, I think, because in the 80s, O-Gauge had died a death, and so virtually my customers I had was virtually coming back looking for new stuff. So by 89, all the fiberglass, including the British, was finished.